The Dallas sun, a brutal, unforgiving eye in the sky, was a stark contrast to the horrifying scene unfolding in my home. The air was thick not with unspoken tension, but with the cold, venomous fury that radiated from my son Liam. He wasn't just standing below me. He was already on the staircase, his body a coiled spring of malevolence, blocking my descent. His face, once so familiar and dear, was a grotesque mask of rage, a chilling portrait of a man consumed by a toxic cocktail of debt and desperate ambition. The document he clutched in his hand wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a weapon, my house deed, the very soul of this home, a sanctuary my late husband and I had built with love. "Sign it, old woman. Now," he snarled, his voice a low, guttural growl that was alien to my ears. In that horrifying moment, I wasn't just a 70-year-old widow named Sarah. I was a hostage in my own home, trapped in a standoff with my own flesh and blood. The grand spiral staircase, with its polished mahogany banister and wide, inviting steps, was now a precipice, a symbol of a trust that was about to be broken in the most brutal way imaginable. Liam had been pressuring me for weeks, his demands escalating from subtle hints to outright threats. He had lost everything. A series of high-risk, foolish investments in the volatile cryptocurrency market had turned his life into a financial ruin. The money I had given him, the inheritance I had hoped would give him a fresh start, was gone, swallowed by the digital abyss of NFTs and junk bonds. He believed the house was his last hope, a $1 million beacon that would bail him out of his self-inflicted ruin. His final ultimatum was not a plea but a terrifying declaration. "Sign the deed, or you're not leaving this staircase." But I couldn't. This house wasn't just a building. It was George's legacy, a living memory of our life together. It was a promise I had made to him, a sacred trust one would protect with my last breath. My refusal had ignited a cold, ruthless inferno in Liam's eyes that I had never known existed. He lunged at me, his eyes narrowed with a terrifying finality. I braced myself, knowing that the man I had raised was gone, and in his place stood a predator ready to strike. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs as he moved to push me down, a hollow echo of his empty soul. Before we continue, make sure you follow our page so you don't miss our next true stories, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Your support helps us share these messages with more people who need hope. The house itself was a testament to a life well lived. Built in the late 1960s, it was a mid-century modern masterpiece, a house that had witnessed decades of family dinners, birthday parties, and quiet, loving moments. George and I had raised Liam within its walls, and every room held a memory. The grand staircase, with its intricate wrought iron railings and perfectly polished wooden steps, was the centerpiece of the home. It was here that Liam had learned to walk, here that he had posed for his prom pictures, and here that I had stood, a proud and loving mother, as he graduated from college. It was more than a home. It was a museum of our family's history, a sacred trust one felt I had a duty to protect. Liam, however, saw it only as an asset. He had always been more concerned with the material trappings of success than with the deeper, more meaningful aspects of life. His friends, a revolving cast of high-flying, self-proclaimed entrepreneurs, had convinced him that quick money was the only path to happiness. He was a man with a gambling addiction, a thirst for easy wealth that had led him down a dark and treacherous path. His investments in the stock market were failing, his venture capital had dried up, and his credit rating was a subprime mess. He was desperate, and his desperation had turned him into a monster. He believed that with the house deed, he could secure a massive home equity loan, a final, desperate measure that would either save him or destroy him. He had already contacted a shady mortgage broker, and had a plan to liquidate the property, leaving me with nothing but the clothes on my back. This house, this testament to my family's history, was a sanctuary of love and a museum of our memories. The grand, spiral staircase was more than just a way to get from one floor to another. It was where George had taught Liam to count the steps, where we had taken annual Christmas photos, and where my husband had carried me up to bed after I broke my ankle. The spacious, sun-drenched living room with its vintage fireplace was where we had gathered for holidays, its worn rug a testament to decades of play and laughter. The kitchen, with its rustic wooden cabinets, held the scent of George's famous Sunday morning pancakes and the faint, sweet smell of a life filled with love and warmth. Each memory was a sacred thread in the tapestry of our family, and Liam's ruthless ambition threatened to unravel it all. Liam's descent into greed was a slow, agonizing slide. He had fallen in with a group of so-called mentors, who spoke in a language of blockchain technology, fintech, and disruptive innovation. They promised him a life of luxury and endless passive income. A life that a simple, honest family would never understand. They were all flash and no substance, with leased sports cars and expensive suits. Their faces a carefully constructed mask of confidence that hid a deep-seated fear of failure. They had convinced him that the old way of life, a life of hard work, thrift, and emotional bonds, was for losers, and that the true measure of a man was his net worth. He had bought into it hook, line, and sinker. He started with small, foolish investments in speculative stock options, then moved on to more dangerous ventures. He took out multiple high-interest personal loans to fund a tech startup that was all hype and no product, burning through my inheritance in less than a year. The business imploded, leaving him with a mountain of debt. He then pivoted to real estate speculation, buying a dilapidated property on a variable rate mortgage that he couldn't afford to flip. When the market soured, he was left with a decaying house and a debt collector breathing down his neck. The final nail in the coffin was his disastrous foray into the cryptocurrency market, a last-ditch attempt to win back his fortune. He had bought into a stablecoin that turned out to be nothing but a Ponzi scheme, and within weeks, his entire investment was wiped out. By the time he came for the house deed, Liam was a desperate man. His once bright eyes were now hollowed out by fear and sleepless nights. The pride he had once exuded was replaced by a simmering rage, a resentment that I, his mother, had what he so desperately needed. The house deed, a final lifeline to his self-created ruin. He saw it only as a means to an end, a source of quick cash to pay off his mounting debts and reclaim the shallow status he had lost. He had already contacted a shady mortgage broker, who promised him a massive home equity loan. A final, desperate measure that would either save him or destroy him. He had a plan to liquidate the property, a plan that would leave me with nothing but the clothes on my back and a future on the streets. He was no longer my son. He was a desperate gambler on a losing streak, and I was his last, most valuable chip. The air was thick with his rage as Liam finally snapped. He lunged at me, his face a grotesque mask of fury, a silent scream of a man who had lost his soul. "The deed, Mom," he hissed, his voice a low, venomous growl. "Give me the damn deed." I stumbled backward, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had been foolish to think I could reason with him. This was not a negotiation. This was an assault, a premeditated act of violence disguised as a simple family dispute. He grabbed my arms, his grip surprisingly strong, and shoved me backward with a brutal, single-minded force. The impact of his hands on my arms was like a lightning strike, a jolt of pure, cold malice that traveled through my entire body. His face was inches from mine, and I saw a horrifying vacancy in his eyes, a complete absence of the son I had known. The veins in his neck were popping, and a thin line of spittle formed at the corner of his mouth as he roared, "Give it to me!" My heart was a hummingbird trapped in a cage, fluttering and frantic as I lost my footing. The polished wood floor was a terrifying blur beneath me, the intricate patterns of the grain a dizzying spiral into darkness. I was falling. The fall felt as if it were happening in slow motion, a surreal, horrifying slide into darkness. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the impact, the inevitable cracking of bones, the final, humiliating end to my life. Every fiber of my being screamed with a primal terror as the laws of gravity took hold, pulling me down toward the unforgiving floorboards below. My hands clawed at the air, searching for a grip that wasn't there, and I could hear the rustle of my clothes as I hurtled toward my certain doom. I saw a flash of my late husband, George, his kind, gentle smile a cruel mirage in my final moments. "I'm sorry, George," I thought. I couldn't protect our home. The thought was a dagger to my heart, a final, painful punctuation to my life of love and devotion. But the impact never came. Instead, I felt a gentle, but firm, presence behind me, a force that was not of this world. It was a presence of warmth and love, a supernatural hand that gently pushed me back onto the landing, holding me suspended in the air for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to regain my balance. The air around me suddenly smelled of jasmine and fresh rain, and a soft whispered voice, a voice that was not my own, echoed in my mind. "Fear not, for I am with you always." It was not a dream. It was a miracle, a divine intervention that had defied the laws of physics and nature. It was the absolute, unshakable certainty of a higher power, a force that had intervened to protect a life from the cold, ruthless hands of a son who had lost his soul. The air shimmered with an unseen energy, and the warmth that radiated from the presence was so profound, so pure, that it felt as if 1,000 suns had just ignited behind me. It was not a sound I heard, but a knowing I felt in the very depths of my being, a promise whispered in the language of a love so deep and so ancient that it transcended all understanding. I stood there, trembling not with fear, but with a profound and overwhelming gratitude for a second chance, for a miracle that had defied the very rules of the universe. My feet found the landing, but Liam, in his unbridled rage and his desperate need to take the deed, lost his footing. The force he had used to push me, the violent momentum of his attack, turned against him. He stumbled, his legs going out from under him, and he fell. But he didn't fall gracefully. He fell with a horrific, sickening crunch, his body twisting in a way that defied the human form. I heard a sound like a bag of bones being tossed down a flight of stairs, a series of sickening snaps and crunches that made my stomach lurch. He hit every single step on the way down. A brutal, bone-crushing descent that was an absolute antithesis to the grace and serenity of my own near fall. The house deed, which he had held so tightly, fluttered from his hand like a morbid, white feather, landing with a soft, feathery sound beside him at the bottom of the staircase. The sickening silence that followed was broken only by the whimpering of a man who had lost everything. A man who had committed a terrible, irreversible act, and was now paying the price. I, by some divine miracle, was completely unharmed. My knees were scraped, my hands were a little bruised, but my spirit was intact. I stood there, for a moment, in a state of shock, looking down at the broken man at the bottom of the stairs, the same man who had been my son, the man who had tried to end my life. My mind, usually a quiet and serene place, was a maelstrom of confusion and disbelief. Was this a dream? Was this a nightmare? I looked down at my hands, at the scrapes and the bruises, and I knew it was real. I could still feel the phantom warmth of the presence behind me, a physical memory of the divine intervention that had saved me. I called for help, and within minutes, the flashing lights of an ambulance and a police car were a surreal, blinking mosaic outside my window. The paramedics, two young men with faces that were a mix of youthful inexperience and the hardened grimace of those who have seen too much, were at the bottom of the stairs in an instant. They worked on Liam for what felt like an eternity, their faces a mask of professional concern as they tended to his broken body. The police, two quiet, efficient men with tired eyes, took my statement, but I did not press charges. There was no need. The punishment was already unfolding, a divine reckoning that was far more severe than any earthly law could ever administer. When the paramedics finally carried him out on a stretcher, a look of abject terror and pain on his face, the head paramedic, a quiet, kind man with a weathered face, looked at me with a knowing, gentle sadness. "You were blessed, ma'am," he said, his voice a low, warm whisper. "I have never seen anyone take a fall like that and walk away unscathed." He then pointed to Liam, his gesture a quiet, final act of a man who had seen too much. "As for him, he has a long road ahead of him. He is paralyzed from the waist down." I knew, in my heart of hearts, that this was not a tragic accident, but a divine intervention, a prophecy fulfilled. This was the ultimate poetic justice, a life-altering consequence for a life-altering sin. The man who had been driven by a ruthless, unbridled ambition to take from me had been brought to his knees in the very place he had committed his terrible sin. He had wanted the house, the physical, tangible property, and in his desperate, selfish pursuit, he had lost the one thing he could never get back, the use of his legs. It was a cruel, perfect, and terrifying irony, a final, painful punctuation to a story that had been written by his own greed and selfishness. I knew then that my life was not over, but that a new, more profound chapter had just begun. In the years that followed, my life found a new purpose. The house, which had been the object of such terrible greed, was transformed into a place of refuge and hope. The process of converting the space was a healing journey in itself, a physical manifestation of my emotional recovery. We tore down walls that had once felt confining, painted over the old, familiar colors with bright, hopeful new hues, and filled the rooms with laughter and life. I converted it into a shelter for single mothers and their children, a place where they could find a safe space to live, a community of support, and a chance to rebuild their lives. I had a new family, a new purpose, and a new reason to live. I was an activist, a beacon of hope, and a living testament to the fact that even in the darkest of moments, a divine hand can guide you toward the light. I had learned that the true value of a home is not measured in property deeds, but in the love and compassion that fills its walls. As for Liam, his life was a ghost story, a cautionary tale I told myself at night. He had lost everything. His friends had abandoned him, his investments had failed, and the house he had so desperately wanted was no longer his. His downfall was not a sudden collapse, but a slow, agonizing unraveling of a life built on sand. He was confined to a wheelchair, a constant, physical reminder of his fall from grace. He lived in a small, cramped room in a nursing home. A man who once had everything and was now left with nothing. His days were a monotonous cycle of physical therapy, painful exercises, and the quiet, gnawing shame of what he had done. He was haunted by his choices, by the ghost of a life he had recklessly squandered. The expensive suits were replaced by hospital gowns, the sports car by a sterile, metallic wheelchair, and the lavish parties by the lonely, sterile silence of a hospital room. The man who had once been so full of ambition was now a shadow of his former self, a specter of the person he had once been. The first time I saw him after his fall, it was on a rainy, miserable Tuesday afternoon. A day that felt like a cosmic echo of the day he had tried to push me down the stairs. I had gone to the nursing home to visit a friend, and as I walked down the long, sterile hallway, I saw a figure in a wheelchair, his back to me. His shoulders were hunched, his head bowed, and his hands, once so full of a desperate, violent rage, now rested limply on his lap, a testament to his utter defeat. I recognized him instantly, and my heart, which had been so full of a fierce, protective love just moments ago, felt a sudden, sharp, and painful pang of recognition. He was a ghost of his former self, his once vibrant eyes now hollowed out by pain and shame. He had been a man of ambition, a man who had lived his life in the fast lane, but now he was a shadow, a specter of the person he had once been. He didn't beg for money or a place to stay. He simply begged for my forgiveness. His voice was a raw guttural sob, a sound that tore at my heart and filled me with a complex mix of love, pain, and a profound, overwhelming sadness. He was not a monster. He was a broken man, a boy who had lost his way, and as I reached for his hand, I knew that the true test of my faith was not in my survival, but in my ability to forgive. The house I lost was not a possession to be sold. It was a sanctuary of love, a legacy of my husband's heart. My son, in his foolish pursuit of wealth, had stolen from me the one thing that was not mine to give, my home. But in doing so, he had given me something infinitely more valuable, my freedom. I was now free from the chains of material possessions, free to find a new purpose, and free to live a life of meaning and purpose. The most precious inheritance is not what you gain, but what you preserve through faith and love. The true treasure is not in the walls of a house, but in the heart of a mother who has been tested and not found wanting. My story is a painful but powerful warning. A life built on greed is a house built on sand, ready to collapse at the slightest tremor. But a life built on faith, love, and grace is a fortress, unassailable against even the most destructive storms. If this story has resonated with you, if you have faced your own storms of betrayal or loss, I pray you will take a moment to reflect on your own journey. Recognize the unseen hand that has guided you. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us share these messages of hope and resilience with more people who are searching for their own beacon of light in the darkness. Thank you, and may God bless you in your darkest moments and beyond.